Greetings and welcome to the 18th Austin Jewish Film Festival. Thank you to our partners, supporters, sponsors, and volunteers who are enabling us to celebrate the best in Jewish film while we can't be together in person. The Austin Jewish Film Festival, for Jew and you too.
It's my very great pleasure to welcome acclaimed international director Asaf Galay, who is also a museum curator at Bet Haftutzot in Israel. Asaf, shalom, shalom.
Shalom, nice to meet you. I wish that I could come to Austin and not to do it Zoom. I love Austin. It's a great city. I've been there, I think 10 years ago, and I dream to come back.
Well, you know the way we say next year in Jerusalem? Next year in Austin.
In Austin, yes.
Okay.
This is really good for this weird city.
Yeah, we're trying to keep it weird, as if the world is not weird enough today. Let's talk a little bit about your current film, Army of Lovers in the Holy Land. I love this film, and we have obviously a very compelling character who we're going to talk to live in just a few minutes. What I wanted to know is, how did you come to this project?
So this film started with a teenager passion. When I had my bar mitzvah, until then I played violin, and then in Israel came MTV, and I saw the clips of Army of Lovers, and I fell in love with them. They were like kitsch and queer. They were so amazing, and they were singing in Hebrew. I felt that this is amazing. Everybody laughed about me because everybody loved Kurt Cobain and people like this, and they were like so glamorous. And then happened the things, this awful, this misunderstood thing in Israel, that Israel put this complaint to MTV and censorship the clip Israelism, and I felt so bad about it. So I sent, in the name of the Israeli fan letter to Army of Lovers, please, I really apologize. People loves you in Israel. Please come to Israel. And they didn't answer me. So I kept every year, send them like a good Jewish boy every year, greetings, Happy New Year. I wish you all the best, and keeping stalking and nudging them over the years. Later, I send them emails. I got their email address and still keeping stalking and send them a letter. Never got any feedback from them. And then one day I got an email from them, and they told me, you're the guys that send us all the time emails. Was Alexander Bard sent me. I have some good news for you. Come to Stockholm. I was, wow, what is going on? So I I bought a ticket. I went to Stockholm. I met Jean-Pierre and Alexander Bard. They told me about that Jean-Pierre is really planning to do this Aliyah. And I thought, I really want to make a film, to follow this journey about him. This is my dream. And I said, okay, you will do it. And I felt like a dream, to feel these heroes for your childhood, these people in Sweden that they are. Jean-Pierre Barda was the hairdresser of the Queen. Alexander Bard is like working in Swedish Got Talent. They know ABBA, they know everybody, and they are hanging out with me. I'm still in shock that I did this film. And I love it.
Persistence pays off.
Exactly, always.
And then, what do you hope people get from this film? I mean, we're going to talk to Jean-Pierre shortly. I mean, I think this is quite an unusual film in terms of, in so many different ways, he's an unexpected character.
Yes, I didn't want to do what it's called biopic about the Army of Lovers, or I called it Wikidoku, that will tell in 1991 they did this, that, then they split. I don't try to do this kind of film. For me, for this you can read the Wikipedia or read the article. I don't know. I wanted to do a film about a guy, he's very famous, but still he's looking for a home. He was kicked out from his house when he was very young.
Mm-hmm.
He found a new home in this band. And you can see that this band, they are like brother and sister. They are really in good relationship. And later on, the band, you know, there is life for pop bands. It's not forever. And after, you know, 30 years of activity on and off, he need to find a new home, a new place. And he find a new homeland. And his homeland in his Jewish identity, it's Israel. And this is the story of him finding a new homeland and living behind Army of Lovers, Sweden, and that's all.
Well,
And I
I
will
want to
not
thank.
tell you more spoilers.
Pardon me?
And I will not tell more
Good.
spoilers.
No plot spoilers. Good. So don't get any hate mail. I want to say thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for your beautiful film. We really hope the audience enjoys this. We're very excited that the AGLIF, the All Genders Lifestyles and International Film Festival, are our presentation partners on this. And without more ado, let me introduce Jean-Pierre Barda. Asaf, thank you. And like I said, let me introduce Jean-Pierre Michel Barda. Jean-Pierre is a Swedish and Israeli singer, actor, makeup artist, and hairdresser of French Algerian Jewish descent. He is most notable for being one of the founding members of the pop group Army of Lovers. Barda was born in Paris, France. His father was of Algerian Jewish origin. When he was 7, he moved to Sweden with his family and settling in Stockholm. Barda immigrated to Israel in 2015, but is currently joining us from Stockholm, Sweden. Jean-Pierre, you prefer Jean-Pierre or Michel?
Both works for me, so just choose what works best for you.
Maybe we'll switch it up. Thank you for being with us. It's lovely to have you in our festival.
Thank you. Great having us. Thank you.
So you had a stalker follow you and send you letters for a long time, and somehow or other you decided that you wanted to let them come and take a camera and follow you around. You have to tell us what the thinking was behind that.
Well, actually, I had no idea about Asaf's stalking because he was communicating with Alexander, and Alexander some way filtered it out for many years. And but in the end, when I got to know about the project, I was in a way thrilled because my reconnection with Israel has taken a long path. I was until the age of 15, and I was active in Bnei Akiva. I was active in Jewish community life here in Stockholm, and then the moment I was expelled from home, I just cut with everything, and it took me many years to find my way back. Even though, for example, during the years with the Army of Lovers, where we were very productive in writing, I would use my Jewish heritage into the material we were writing. So mentally I never left, but and then I spent quite a lot of time in Barcelona, in Spain, and there I met so many Israeli guys in the gay scene. And for me, I didn't connect being gay and being Jewish. That was something that went well together. And suddenly a whole new world opened up, and I realized I would find my way back to my Jewish roots.
I think the film is a really interesting sort of investigation of identity. And let me ask you this: how old were you when you came out?
I realized quite early my sexual orientation. I came out not willingly at the age of 15 and a half on a vacation in Paris.
And this is when you were thrown out of the house?
Yes, and the day after, I was on a train with my best friend that was visiting us in Paris at that time, and I was homeless. So it was quite dramatic, and it took me many years before I I reconnected with my family, which we did after something like 15 years of silence. We reconnected, of course, not easily. And I'm still working, you know, I'm still handling I don't know if it's the right word, but the scars from those early days.
The trauma?
In those days, for me, you know, I don't remember crying or being, I was upset, of course, and scared, and my whole world came tumbling down. And but you know, I never cried, and I just went into some kind of survival mode, and shifted my personality, took a shift from being a well-educated Jewish boy to a flamboyant gay. All my energy went into my gay personality.
And did you feel that I mean, it sounded like until you got to Barcelona, it felt like you had to choose one or the other, that you weren't really aware that you could embrace both at the same time.
Yes, but that came, you know, many years later. As a young teenager, I didn't see the possibility, and I was, you know, I was planning to do my Aliyah in my 20s, but that never happened. And I must say, there is a part of me that really that is sad, that is grieving the fact that I didn't do the Aliyah when I was supposed to do it. And because frankly, doing the Aliyah at 50, when I was in Ulpan, which is the language school when you come to Israel, who said that, well, I get, you know, people do Aliyah in their 20s and go to the military, or they do it when they are retired, but you do it in your 50s. What's that? And I must say, he has a point. It's really difficult to restart your life the way I wanted to restart it also, because I wanted to have a clean start. I didn't want to work as a hairdresser or makeup artist. I didn't want to be on stage. I just wanted to have an ordinary life.
Well, let me just define the term Aliyah or Aliyah for those members who are not Jewish. So that's the process. It's an interesting term because it gets used in two different perspectives. It's the idea of Jews returning to Israel, literally being called up, and it's also the term at a Shabbat or any day service when the Torah is read. It's the process of being called up to the Torah. So this sort of, you know, connection there. But Aliyah is sort of immigrated, for Jews to immigrate to Israel, I guess would be the shorthand for non-Jewish people.
And there is actually a term for going down, because when you leave Israel as an Israeli citizen, it's called that you're going down.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to go back to, you know, you mentioned that you reconciled with or you can reconnected with your parents. And I wonder if you could talk to us a little about, you know, that process. I mean, I think for many of my gay friends, I know that it's oftentimes, it's not always easy coming out to your parents. For some people it is, thankfully, but for other people, it's very difficult. And some people never reconnect with their parents, others do. And I'm curious, you know, what enabled you to reconnect with them and what that process was like, and whether ultimately it was satisfying, or whether you think there were, you know, it really didn't go, you know, all the way that you wanted it to.
You know, my father passed this fall, and we luckily we managed to have we had an amazing moment together just a couple of months before he passed, which was a blessing. The thing is, you know, the difference between the generations in this case, where my father didn't have the vocabulary to express his thoughts more than all the things that scared him and the things that appalled him. But he contacted me something like 15 years after those years of silence for a meeting at home with my brothers. And at that time, you know, I was really curious what that was about.
That would have to be a pretty scary invitation to receive.
It was, and I didn't get it from him personally. I got it through my brothers, and I was invited home for dinner, for Shabbat dinner, and you know, I came in through the door, and everything was like nothing ever happened. I was really fascinated. it was a it was a, like an out of body experience, really weird. And at the end of the dinner, when we were having dessert, my father said that, well, as I've summoned you all to be here because I'm, you know, it's time for you to plan for my older days. And at that point, it was really sad. But at that point, I stopped listening, and I interrupted him after a while. And I said, I'm really, really sorry. I wish I could respond in another way to what you're saying, but unfortunately, I don't have anything in me that kicks in and wants to be part of your older days. I mean, you let me go years ago, and I wish I could be a better person. And I really was thinking, I really wished I could be a better person, but I couldn't. So then I left the dinner, and not until before he died, I realized that was his way of taking me back into the family, saying, you are a part of this family, and you will be part of this decision as well. But this was his way to say it. I didn't get it at that time. I got it too late. But of course, I mean, after that meeting, we started to talk slowly, and gradually by the years, we managed to have some kind of a connection. I used to cut his hair when I came to Sweden. I mean, when I was in Israel, I used to go back to Sweden every third month to take care of clients and to visit my mother, and which I have a better contact with, of course. They divorced after a couple of years, and sadly, part of the divorce was because my mother wasn't allowed to. She didn't have any saying in me leaving. It was all was his saying. So, but we reconnected. I used to cut his hair, and I'm still processing. I'm still, you know, I left Tel Aviv in quite a bad state in June after I broke my hip just before the first lockdown, and I was in the middle of processing the grief and the loss after my father. And I'm picking up the work now when I'm in Sweden. So I'm in therapy, and yeah, life
Sounds
goes
like
on.
you've had a pretty rough couple of months.
Absolutely, and but you know, this is a well-needed break, I think, and I will be back in Tel Aviv. I'm waiting for a vaccine, and the moment there is a vaccine, I will find my way back and get back on the saddle again.
Let's talk a little bit about Army of Lovers. How did they come to form? I mean, I'm certainly not a psychoanalyst, but it strikes me that part of your story, you know, being rejected by your family early on, you know, it comes across to me that you were looking for family, you found these other people in the group, but then also the same sort of thing, looking with family in terms of coming to Israel. And I wonder, is that an accurate statement? And if you could tell us about the form, you know, how you came to have these other people, you know, bands, you know, music comes and goes, but it seems like you have a much deeper relationship with the band members than just you know, musical colleagues.
Absolutely. I mean, doing the band fulfilled me in many ways, and I think I dealt a lot about my losses and my past in writing in the work we did, and but in a fun way, of course. But you know, since the breakup from the family, it was all about finding new families all the time. I got a foster mother, the best friend that was with me in Paris. Her mother became my foster parent, and so I've been going, you know, from family to families, and I'm still in touch with all my chosen family members, and I'm very grateful. I've really been lucky. I've been having amazing people around me, and meeting Alexander really changed a lot, because Army of Lovers was really a way of dealing with a lot of things in a fun way, and in a way that was very deliberating, even for ourselves, or at least for me. A lot of people used to.
Sorry, I was going to say, how did you meet Alexander at the beginning?
I was doing drag show at the time that I met him, and he was working together with a designer that I've been working with as well. And she actually introduced us and said that you should meet this guy. She told Alexander that he should meet me because I was a great makeup artist and hairstylist. And so I was brought into a project that Alexander had before Army of Lovers called Barbie. And from that point, we became friends, and we started to have ideas, and we developed a teamwork that developed into Army of Lovers.
You know what struck, I don't know, you know, I listened to what you say in the film, you know, about if you've got musical talent or you don't have musical talent, you know, what you should do, and, you know, use costume and so forth. But when I look at, I mean, I grew up in Dublin, Ireland, right about the time when the band was there. And I have to confess, I was unaware of you until very recently. But, you know, looking back and having been in Europe at, you know, when you were performing there, it strikes me that there's a sort of paradox, because on one hand, it looks like everything you're doing is, you know, sort of flippant and very sort of casual. But on the other hand, there's obviously an awful lot of attention that's gone into the music and the words and the production, you know, the hair and the makeup. And there's this sort of like glam punk aspect I get to it. It's sort of like, you know, giving people the finger, but sort of really caring what they think at the same time. I don't know, is that, was there a sort of did you have a deliberate ethos or philosophy for the band, or was it just whatever the heck goes?
We developed a philosophy during the years we worked on the lyrics, and we worked on the material. And I think that comes automatically. I mean, it starts one way and then it evolves. But it was always, the production was always effortless. It was really fun, and it was easy, and it came very naturally. What was exhausting was the following, all the traveling and all the, I mean, we became very successful in Europe in a very short time, and it all happened very fast after Crucified and Obsession, and it was very, very intense, and that was the hardest part, actually.
Was just going out and meeting the fans and being on the road?
Well, meeting fans is always great, but, you know, doing a TV show or a radio show at 7 o'clock in the morning, and you know, we used to do, even if it was a radio show, we would come in full costumes and makeup. So,
did you just stay up the whole night, or did you go to bed and get up early?
Well, I you know, people say, oh, well, you must have had so much fun and crazy parties and everything. Frankly, for us, it wasn't much of a party time, because we had those schedules, you know, early mornings and very late nights. In the morning, you would have a radio show. Midday, you would have afternoon TV shows. And in the evening, you would have a club gig or an evening TV show. So there wasn't much sleep, because in those days I was doing the makeup for the rest of the band as well. I mean, we took pride in having everything, in doing everything ourselves, not having to take in a designer or a makeup artist. We worked with the same team all the time with the videos. We worked with the same designer. I did hair and makeup, and after a while, when we became four, I took in assisting people, so I would be able to focus on my own part as well.
And before Asaf's film, had anybody else done a long form sort of biography documentary of the band?
No, there's been a couple of short, in Sweden they had a short series called The Story Behind the Hit. So there was a 1-hour TV show about Crucified, but never this way. And I've always turned down anything that would have to do with my private life. I've never done any of those, you know, home sessions with magazines showing my home or talking about my private life. I realized in an early stage that it has a cost. I mean, you can be super happy and you want to share that with the rest of the world, and it's so easy to talk to media. But then when you have your darker days, you have to share that as well. And all my life, I've been having this kind of a shadow with depression following me. So I think that made it very made it important to keep that integrity. And I
So
met,
why?
you know,
So why? Sorry, I beg your pardon. Please go ahead.
so when this opportunity came doing this documentary, first I thought my part would be very small and it would be more about the band. But still, I thought it was a great opportunity to what was important for me was to be able to be part of showing Israel and Judaism in another context that was non-political, and to show that, you know, being gay and being Jewish and being Israeli was something that went really well together.
Well, you sort of, as they say, you opened the kimono up. If you were trying to keep very private, I think you kind of failed spectacularly to the benefit of the audience to do so.
Yeah, but I did it with pleasure. Sorry, it's telling me that I'm running out of batteries, which is really stupid.
Oh, no.
Because I'm just gonna move to another part and use the electricity.
Plug it in. That's fine. We can keep talking while you do that. So, you know, you were talking about, you know, wanting to show Israel in a positive light, and also,
and a non-political light also.
And a non-political light, yeah. And I think one of the things that, you know, I found very compelling about the film was a number of sort of unexpected experiences. So, and I'm particularly interested to hear, you know, as a gay person, as a Jew, you know, two populations that unfortunately have experienced an awful lot of hate that's undeserved, and also somebody who's lived in Sweden, which, at least I think for most Americans, has this aura of being a very, you know, live and let live society. And people think of Israel as being, you know, in many ways, certainly people who haven't been there oftentimes have an idea of Israel of being just what you see on the news. And of course, that's not what the country is like. And, you know, Jerusalem and Tel Aviv are about as far apart as you could be in such a short geographical distance. So I'm interested to hear a few things. I mean, what your experience was like living in Sweden as a Jew, and whether also being gay in Sweden, you know, whether you experienced any homophobia there, and then vice versa in Israel. One presumes one hopefully doesn't experience any anti-Semitism, but you know, do you think that those stereotypes of Swedish and American and Israeli societies are justified, or do you think that that's a sort of an oversimplified view?
I would definitely say it's an oversimplified view. I mean, just take the material of the band, and that we actually, I mean, we're made here in Sweden, and in Sweden we cause just as much attention as abroad. So I mean, Sweden gets credit for a lot of things that were more due to the 70s, and Sweden has changed a lot, and it's definitely not that liberal country that it wants to be, but it looks like it. But everything is very polite. I grew up with my parents saying, well, don't say that we're Jewish. You don't have to say that we're Jewish. And you know, when I would say I'm Jewish, you would have this, oh, you're Jewish, and you would never know if it was something good or bad. And it's the same with the gay thing, but the gay thing has been, you know, in Sweden has been quite an easy country for the gay community. Though we were the last country to get
to decriminalize homosexuality.
Not to decriminalize, but to get the partnership and the marriage possibilities.
Or civil unions.
Finland, that is more conservative, beat us to that, actually. So,
well,
you know,
we had a certain amount of that here in the United States, where Iowa, which is a very conservative state, recognized gay marriage much earlier than many other states. So go figure.
Yeah, and in Israel, I would say, you know, they always say that Tel Aviv is a bubble, but it's a very important bubble because things starts there and it ripples off to the rest of the country. And you can feel, I think that you feel that when you're there, that Tel Aviv is special, but when you get out of Tel Aviv, for example, there is a lot of pride events in smaller cities all around of Israel, not only in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, which is amazing. It says a lot about the development in the country.
Do you know what the Jewish population is in Sweden today? I mean, we see some scenes in the film where you're in a synagogue in Stockholm, I believe. Do you have an idea of the population? And of course, this is always how many Jews are there. It's always, but a range, just sort of rough idea.
Wow, I have no idea. I know it's less than it used to be. And I remember, for example, the big synagogue used to be much more crowded when I was a kid. So the climate for Jews here in Sweden, it's, I really understand that Jews you don't feel really safe, even in a country like Sweden, because it's so fragile. It could turn, with one change of government. And I mean, it's the same. I mean, it's the same for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, unfortunately, I mean, hopefully we're seeing, the corner turn, but whether it's, in France or Germany or, Poland or Hungary, I mean, where I grew up in Ireland, there's interest. I mean, there's a lot of things that are very similar to what you talked about. But, in Ireland, the Jewish population has been there for quite a while, but it's a minority and it's typically getting smaller. But, the Irish always tend to root for the underdog. And that means that there's a lot of pro-Palestinian sympathies, both.
The same in Sweden. Same in Sweden. The Swedish state is very pro-Palestinian. But I would say that if you speak with the average Swedish person, they are not as negative as the state is to Israel. And
well, I think that's that's always true when people meet one-on-one and you have to talk to a real person across a coffee. You're not talking about some idealistic ideas about a country. You're talking to a real person.
I have so many examples of friends visiting me in Tel Aviv, and everybody is just shocked because, and they all say, this is not what we expected. And I asked them, what did you expect? And they say, like, well, we expected a war zone and to see militaries everywhere and to see religious people everywhere. And,
because it's what they see on the news.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Same thing. I always say to people, who have a very, I mean, listen, Israel's a complex society. I don't personally agree with all of the political decisions in Israel, but when people are just completely against Israel, I say, look, you've got to go there and you've got to experience it. And you have to understand, what it represents, and what are the truly good parts of Israel, and what are some of the challenging parts, and then you can have a meaningful conversation. But to just sort of write off an entire country and a population is, it's completely inappropriate.
Totally, I totally agree with you on that.
Now, I want to talk. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
No, I was going to say one of the things that I thought was really fascinating was. The experience of seeing when you arrive in Israel, I'm not used to seeing somebody wearing a little bit of makeup and chamsa earrings, wearing fatigues and helping out with the army. I don't know if you were required to do service, but it looked like you were very willingly helping out in the adjunct of the army. And was that something that was important to you? And like, how did that feel to you?
I wanted to, because I knew already that the Israeli army is it's a defense army, and they always, they really point out that the focus is on defense, and I thought that was, I could feel that being in Israel, you have the army present, but it's not present in an awkward or strange way, and feels more like protection more than anything else. And the IDF is also one of the first in many places to be, when there is an earthquake or a tsunami all over the world. For example, when the tsunami hit in Thailand years ago, and Sweden was not among the first on the spot. It was Israel was before Sweden even reacted and did something. So
I don't think it was taken up on, but when there was that horrible explosion in Beirut, they know that the Israeli rescue forces were some of the first to volunteer to come help because they have the technology and the experience.
And they do as much as they can, and they also do as much as they. Yeah, and also they do as much as they can to help out in Syria and in the borders close to Syria. So, but it's like you say, I don't agree with everything political in that is happening in Israel. The political system is something that I would say needs a change in Israel because there's far too many parties. So voting, for example, I've been voting. I voted twice during my stay in Israel, and it's really complicated. There's so many parties. Even the second time when it was about the Kahol Velavan, I don't know if you into the it was people were supposed to vote on the smaller parties. The focus was like, let's focus on these two now. That didn't happen, of course, but I think
trust me, if we get off on Israeli politics, we'll be stuck for a very long time. I'm coming from a country that has proportional representation. I'm always sort of struck between the difference in electoral systems. In the United States, I think that, the two-party system, there are certain benefits. There's a lot of stability, but then there's not truly much choice. And then you look at the opposite, you look at places like Italy and you look at, Israel, where there's all these different parties, and it's kind of crazy. Like, how many, is it 4 elections now in 18 months or something like that in Israel?
And still they don't realize that they need to change the voting system, and that's and I think and you're totally right. I think something in between, but this polarization is the same all over. I mean, in Sweden we have different parties, but we end up being divided. The elections here in Sweden has been the same. The trend is the same everywhere. The winner wins with a very small margin.
And you were saying before we went live that you came back to Sweden right about the time that the virus started to sort of pick up. And we know in the news that Sweden's been handling that very differently. And Israel was doing fantastic in the beginning, and now is unfortunately dealing with trying to get over the second wave that many other countries are dealing with too. And not just the virus, but just in general, how would you just sort of describe your experience of having lived in Israel and lived in Sweden, given the option of you can live in a couple of different places, where do you hope to make your permanent home?
I'm going back for sure. I feel safer in Israel.
Back to Israel, you mean?
Back to Israel. I feel safer in Israel in many ways. It's a more upfront society. It's a more upfront communication. If people dislike you, you know that. If they like you, you know that. Sometimes it can be tough because it's very much in your face, but at least it's honest. And with the COVID situation, I would feel safer in Israel. Here, there is no mask required. It's crazy. I mean, I'm in a risk zone since I have a problem with my lungs, and so I'm in quarantine here in Sweden. In Israel, there is the mask. You can go outdoors, and it's a different feeling. I think it's scary in Sweden. And when I got here in June, I came from a society where you wear the mask and keep social distance. And suddenly I was here in Sweden and everybody was behaving like nothing is going on.
Well, living in the United States, we have both of those things at the same time. Let's go back to the film for just a moment. In the production of this, were there any particularly funny moments from the making of the film that maybe didn't necessarily make it on screen?
Well, not really what I can remember. I remember I was a little bit sad that it didn't show. We had I was working for a year. I was working as a gardener. So I was working with the ecological gardening, with food gardens.
Mm-hmm.
And once a week, we were used to work out. I was in a field outside of Tel Aviv, and that didn't make it into the movie, but that was an amazing year for me. I don't think I've ever been so happy and so relaxed. And
What made it amazing?
being, it was so, we were most of the time we were working, without a lot of people around us. When you're on the field, you only hear the nature around you and your own breath, and then you have lunch. You pick whatever nature offers you, and the pace of life is like, I would come home and I would be totally dirty and exhausted, but I would put the heater on, take a beer, and sit in my garden, and I felt just like, this is heaven.
So you're saying if you weren't a makeup artist and hairdresser and performer, you'd like to be a farmer?
Well, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind. I think I had my fair share of stress, and I love fashion. It's definitely something that is so interesting, and it's so fun to work with in so many levels. I love hairdressing. I'm not so comfortable in the industry that is around it. That's something totally different. Mm-hmm. So, but in Israel, I was able to do both. I mean, I was hairdressing, but I was hairdressing at home. A couple of times I worked in some salons, and it's much more of a choice for me there. And also being, more anonymous. It's, for example, here in Sweden, I could never approach the company and say, hey, I would like to work with you in the gardens. And they would say, like, we can't have you in the gardens. You're Jean-Pierre Barda. It's like, so that was also a liberation to leave this for a totally different life.
Which I heard something recently, and you can tell me whether, because you would know this probably, tell me whether this is true. And that was that the reason that ABBA wore such outrageous flamboyant costumes was because the tax laws in Sweden were that you couldn't write off regular clothes, but if you had costumes, you could get a tax deduction from them.
That's actually true. That's actually true. We have a culture in Sweden, like it's the equivalent of country music. So and these bands, they play, and they play almost every day of the year. And they had a problem with deducting the clothes. But if they made them so outrageous that you couldn't have them outside of stage, you could use it in a favorable way for the taxes. So yes, that's a true story.
So in a strange way, we have the tax man to thank for ABBA and Army of Lovers.
Well, we would have done that anyway, because it's part of the expression, and that's the great thing with Army of Lovers, that we were, we didn't use fashion brands. We had a designer, we did everything. So, and that we worked closely together with the designer. I was really involved with everything that I wear. I've had a saying, and I have an idea about why it looks the way it looks.
And in the making of this, how long did Asaf follow you for? I mean, how long was the actual filming period of this film?
Wow, I would say maybe 2 years.
Oh, really?
Altogether. I'm not sure. I think that's, there was so much going on in between also. So, but it was really easy. I mean, the crew was amazing, and they became very good friends as well.
You seem like somebody who's, you've mentioned, you're still processing a lot of the challenges that have happened in your life, but you seem like somebody who is quite comfortable in their skin, and certainly, at least in front of a crowd, can be very outgoing and flamboyant. And I'm wondering if you met yourself today when you were just about to be thrown out of your parents' house, what advice would you have for yourself, and for that matter for, you know, a young gay person that's, you know, scared about how their family and friends are going to handle the truth about their sexuality?
Well, I would say, don't worry. There is amazing people, and trust. Have trust and be yourself, and you will connect with great people, and you will never be. I mean, in that way, you will never be alone.
Well, Michael,
I think that's what I would say. I'm still working on it, and you know, it's, for me, it took years. I was struggling with stage fright for many years, and today I've really managed. I manage it, and you know, I manage it in my private life as well. And this is part of, sometimes it's part of the trouble. You know, when I'm in therapy, I've said that, you know, I have this thick mask. We all have a mask. We all have a persona, but as an artist, I think we have a mask that is a little bit thicker. And so I tell them, you have to get past this mask. And it comes automatically, you know, the moment, you know, when you've done it for so many years, the moment you leave home, the mask is up.
you're performing.
In a way, I mean, we are all performing the moment we leave our homes, and but yes, in a way. But I mean, with the years, I've become more relaxed, and a big part of this is the years in Israel. That was like having a break from everything, and it helped me a lot.
So last question for you. What would you hope audiences take out of this film?
Inspiration, a good laugh, inspiration, and inspiration in a way that, you know, it's never too late to change directions, even if it can be tough, but it's worth it. It's way worth it.
Well, Jean-Pierre, Michael, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I wish you
The same.
Bavakasha. I hope that you heal quickly and you're able to return to Israel in health and happiness sooner rather than later. And for you, as I say, next year, Jerusalem, right?
Amen to that.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much, David. Thank you all for watching. Bye.
Take care.